Hello and welcome. Well, today I've begun my day by doing a broadcast on a news outlet about Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre. God bless her, God help her. And I wanted to expand a little bit on some of the things I said on the radio. Not that many of you will have heard the radio broadcast, but because some of the questions that were raised, I think, are important and need to be developed. The first thing I want to say is to those of you who are my friends who say, Gavin, for goodness sake, stop looking over your shoulder at the establishment and at the Anglican Church. Just concentrate on looking forward and being a good Catholic. I want to say absolutely, those are my motivations too. I'm happy to take the advice to Lot's wife and not look back, except that, first of all, there are still quite a number of Anglicans who follow me or are friends with me or in some kind of love-hate relationship with me who are considering their position and trying to decide when the moment might come that the Anglican experiment is bust. And the problem is they're not entirely sure they can become Catholics yet because they still suffer from much of the propaganda that's been put into people's heads about either papal supremacy or worshipping, in inverted commas, but of course not, the Virgin Mary. And so one of the reasons why I continue to comment is partly because I'm asked to, and partly because I'm trying to construct an escape route for those people, both the ones I know and the ones I don't know, into the church that Jesus founded. Interestingly enough, one or two of my friends became, well, one in particular I was thinking of, became Catholic and then and gave up for some complicated psychological reasons. And I go on thinking that to some extent, the Catholic Church is almost what we make of it in our own heads. In other words, it has its own profound legitimacy, which I'm deeply convinced by. But of course, it has lacunae, glitches, corruptions. I'm thinking of the obvious corruption that's marred it in our lifetimes, which are not exactly inexplicable, but which are beyond reprehensible. But this means, I think, simply that we have to try and expand the categories of both good and bad in our head. And it partly depends on what we expect. If there is a contemporary Rousseauish idea that everything should start off from being good, and that if it falls below a certain standard of goodness, it must suffer from a real corruption. I take the very different view that I get from Genesis, which is that we are pretty corrupt, and anything that improves our moral state has to have some virtue which we ought to recognize. And I think that what the Catholic Church has managed, what God the Holy Spirit has done within a reluctant Catholicism over the years, is a living miracle that brings some kind of credibility, if you needed it, to Jesus' words that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So why am I look over my shoulder? Answer, because I think I want to help people find their way into the church. And I think the church needs converted Protestants because there are many virtues in Protestantism. I mean, the obvious ones that always appear to me are hymn singing, poetry, literature, a spirit of robust inquiry, all of which I think are immensely valuable, and the Catholic Church would be glad to have within it. But let me go back to Prince Andrew, because so that was my disclaimer, first of all. Prince Andrew, the reason I want to talk about it is because I think we're going to find ourselves with a crisis in which we may lose the monarchy. I'm not suggesting that I know this prophetically, but it's clear to me that in the way in which the monarchy has been developed by now King Charles, its DNA has been changed into a form of multicultural pleasing of the masses, pleasing of the public, which simply is too far removed from the concept of what monarchy is and should be. Ultimately, it's a now, lots of people, if I say Judeo-Christian, that's going to trigger some people, but I'm going to say it anyway. Ultimately, it's a Judeo-Christian idea. Christ is, of course, our king, but there is a perfectly legitimate historic means of government by which the ruler is anointed under Christ and becomes a form of Christian vice regent. But if you take that away and you make it into a multicultural mess, then the legitimacy of monarchy in that model disappears and vaporizes. And that's where we are today. So why does this matter? Because of Prince Andrew's reprehensible behavior. Two things are true at the same time. There's very little good one can find to say about Prince Andrew. I'm sorry about that. I'm sure there is good, but I'm not privy to it. And I'm not here to defend him for a moment. But he doesn't appear to be able to learn lessons. He appears to be in the unhappy position of lacking any sense of morality, accountability, or capacity to say sorry. And he's a very serious dead weight around the neck of the monarchy. And the problem is the monarchy is in trouble, partly because William has no faith yet. Catherine looks to be a very, very worthwhile person, and I think has won the hearts of the people already. But of course, is an ordinary middle-class girl who's married into the royal family. But she may end up by saving it, perhaps. Certainly somebody needs to save it. But Andrew is without virtue as far as we can see. And the question at the moment is whether or not he should be stripped of his royal titles. And in one of the comments that I made to the news outlet today, the problem with this is we have an inherited monarchy. And you can't have a monarchy that works by inheritance on a Monday and doesn't work by inheritance on a Tuesday. It's a nonsense. So he's either born a prince because he's inherited it, or the mob parliament is capable of stripping it away. And the other problem is, of course, and I need to remind myself, that's why the British public is never so dangerous as when it is seized by a moral passion. Evelyn Waugh wrote that. There's another quote that I can't find about the nothing being as dangerous as the British mob in a state of high moral fervour, but I can't locate it. If you know the one I mean, please put it in the chat. I'd be very glad to be reacquainted with it. So the other side of the fact that Andrew has no virtue that we can see is that trial by mob is a very unpleasant and dangerous thing. And the British mob, as Paul says, when seized by a moral passion, is deeply unattractive and very dangerous. I wouldn't want anybody tried by the mob in this state. So what are they going to do with Andrew? Don't know, don't care. In one sense, it's not a matter of importance. But it is a matter of importance insofar as it affects the role of monarchy and the extent to which we're linked to the past by a virtuous umbilical cord of some historical virtue. And that's why Andrew is so incredibly dangerous, because we need to look up to the monarchy. They act as a form of inspiration for us. And under Elizabeth II, that was achieved by her in particular quite well. People had different views about Prince Philip. I liked him very much. I thought his sense of humor was wonderful, and I enjoyed the fact it annoyed people. But we don't have them anymore. We have King Charles, by whom I've been constantly underwhelmed, God bless him, and Camilla. And I'm not sure that I wish them happiness themselves, as I wish anyone happiness, finding love in somebody else. But I'm not sure that the public platform that's been erected for them can sustain the weight of history and what's happened. So it's not just Andrew. It's the fact that Charles comes to this with an immensely problematic history in terms of his relationship between the idea of virtue, the death of Diana, and the public. But my concern is with the Christian content of the monarchy. Now, if Charles was to develop some degree of real Christianity, of real Christian faith, and if you like, cast himself upon the mercy of the British public and say, look, I'm a real Christian king, and what I stand for are virtues that if you lose will threaten the whole of your civilization, then I think whatever the numbers, one could really get behind him and take some joy in that. But he can't do that. And consequently, my own judgment is that the legitimacy of the monarchy is simply melting away day by day. to the point where the crisis will come. I don't know what that crisis will be. I don't know if the crisis will be Charles's death and William's coronation, where he'll be required to say things that he's publicly said he's quite incapable personally of saying. And the gap between the personal life of William and the public office will grow too great to bridge. I come to the point that where I am, which is that the Protestant state experiment has gone. I've no idea how we find a Catholic monarch. I mean, of course, I'm aware that there's laws of succession where there are uh, several contenders to be the Catholic king of Britain, depending on what rules you apply. But this is way beyond my pay grade, and I'm dealing with the principle rather than the practice. I can't work out the practice satisfactorily. But the principle, I think, is that how likely it is or not, there has to be a Catholic renewal, a renewal of Catholic Christianity in the United Kingdom, if there is to be any chance at all of our rescuing our civilization. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, of course. Forgive my bells and my chimes. There we are. Pray for everyone involved. Pray for Andrew. Pray for the soul of Virginia Giuffre. Pray for all involved, but look for a radical revitalization of the Catholic faith, and if possible, I suppose, a Catholic monarchy.